Guys, today's lesson is about reviewing equivalent common fractions that are related and unrelated. We started this in class today, and so I thought we would look at some of the homework problems to kind of give you a jump start in case you stalled when you got home tonight. Alright, so looking at problem A, make sure you grab your paper and a pencil. I see that I have 3/8, and I want to make a fraction which is equivalent to that out of 24ths. So I'm taking my eighths and turning them into 24ths. So if you remember in class, we talked about the multiplication chart and how we can use that chart to sort of help us determine equivalent fractions, look at the multiples of certain numbers to help with that. So I want to think about how can 8 turn into 24 to make an equivalent fraction. And you kind of need to know your math facts to do this. So if you need a multiplication chart, pause the show and go grab one. But I'm going to move on. So 8 times 3 is going to equal 24. And we also learned today in class that whatever I do to the denominator, I also have to do the same process to the numerator. So if I multiply the denominator by 3, the bottom number, I have to multiply the numerator by 3 as well. So that changes things, because if you look, now I'm looking to change the 3 into a different denominator. So 3 times 3 we know is 9, and I could have checked in my chart if I needed that. So 3/8 is equivalent to 9/24. Equivalent fractions. So here we have 4/6, and again, I want to take that 6th and turn it into a 24th. So to do that, I can look at my multiplication chart, think of that basic fact, and I know that 6 times 4 equals 24. And what I do to the denominator, I have to do to the numerator. So I'm going to take my 4, multiply it by 4, and that gives us 16. All right? So let's take a look at B. We have 4/5, and so I'm going to turn my 5ths into 35ths. So to go from 5 to 35, using my multiplication chart, I see that I'm going to multiply by 7. So what I do on the bottom, I have to do to the top. So that changes my numerator now is no longer 4, but when I multiply, go ahead and write what you think that numerator is going to be. Now the other fraction we have here is 5/7. So I'm going to take that 7th and also turn it into 35. So 5 and 7 have a common multiple. The common multiple is 35. To do that, I see that 7 times 5 is 35. So what I do on the bottom, I have to do on the top, which then changes my numerator. So let's take our numerator, multiply that by 5 as well, and you can go ahead and fill in for me those missing numerators. All right, Mrs. Ogle, so looking at letter E, I'm jumping down a little, so keep up with me. I'm on letter E. I see that I'm not given that particular denominator. So I have to kind of come up with what denominator would be common that both of those fractions could become equivalent to. So I'm going to come back here and I'm going to look at the 3 and I'm going to look at the 7, okay? Now, I hope you have that multiplication chart in front of you if you don't know your facts. I want you to look at those multiples of 3 and I want you to look at those multiples of 7, okay? So those multiples of 3 would read like 3, 6, 9, 12, blah, 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 forever and ever and ever. And then the multiples of 7, 7, 14, 21, blah, 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 forever and ever and ever. Now, as you review those multiples, you're going to see a commonality. And that commonality is 21. Both 3 and 7 have a multiple of 21. So now I have a common denominator that I can turn both of these fractions into. All right, so let's go back here. So I have thirds, and now I know I want to turn them into 21sts, right? So, well, how do I do that? Well, according to my chart, I know that 3 times 7 is 21. So what I do on the bottom, I have to do on the top. So now my 2 is no longer 2. I've made that equivalent to 14. So now let's come to 4/7. I had 7. I know I'm changing it into 21sts. Going back to my chart, 7 times what equals 21? That would be 3. What I do on the bottom, I have to do on the top. So now my 4 is going to change as well. 4 times 3 is 12. So 14 21sts and 12 21sts have a related denominator now, a common denominator. So now let's look at the bottom. Now the bottom looks different, but it really is kind of the same principle. So here we have 1/3 and 1/2. So what I'm looking for is a common denominator of thirds and halves. So take a look at your chart, look at your multiples. I want you to look at the multiples of 3, look at the multiples of 2, scan your finger over, look for that common multiple, and they're going to have more than one. They're going to have 6, another common one would be 12, 24, so there's more than one, and it doesn't tell you which one to choose. I like doing smaller math, so I'm going to pick a smaller number. So that means I'm going to choose 6, because 3 can become 6 and 2 can become 6. So how do we go about doing that? Well, 3 times what equals 6? Well, 3 times 2. Well, what I do on the bottom, I have to do on the top to make that equivalent. So 1/3 is no longer 1/3. 1/3 is now 2/6. Now let's come over here to 1/2. How do I go from halves to sixths? Well, to go from 2 to 6, I'm going to multiply by 3. What I do on the bottom, I have to do on the top. So I no longer have 1/2. Instead, I have 3/6. Okay? So, moving ahead, looking at D and G, I have 5 and I have 12. Using that multiplication chart, what's going to be that common denominator? Doesn't have to be the biggest, doesn't have to be the smallest. So there might be more than one answer here. And just remember to go through, and what you do to the denominator, you then have to do to the numerator. I hope this helped, guys, for homework 9.3. Have a great night.